Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt Gloviak. First and foremost, Happy New Year. I hope that all of you are having an enjoyable 2020 thus far. And I also hope that you're keeping up with your New Year's resolutions. So, I have to tell you something, a little bit of bad news. I was reading an article the other day, and it stated that over 50% of people already give up on their New Year's resolutions by the 14th of January. So within 2 weeks, over 50% of individuals give up on their New Year's resolutions. And that number increasingly, skyrockets as we move forward through the rest of the month and so on. This is why it's so important to make sure that you have some type of strategic plan going into those New Year's resolutions like we talked about in our last episode. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to go back and check it out when you have the opportunity. But for this episode, one of the things that we're going to talk about is strategic advocacy. So first and foremost, let's take consideration as to what is advocacy. So advocacy means to advocate on behalf of something. That means to stand up for, to try to move forward with some type of positive social change. Now generally, this is going to be an effort that's made towards some type of underprivileged group, a marginalized group, some type of population that really needs to have their voice heard. Perhaps there's a disparity in terms of resources, or there are no resources available whatsoever. But just like with our New Year's resolutions, we may have some really great ideas to be able to change the world and make it a better place. However, if we don't put it into action, well, there's no guarantee the change is actually going to take place, because if you don't do it, that means somebody else has to. And unfortunately, a lot of us have a lot that's going on, so we can't always rely on that taking place. So, where do we start? Well, like we talked about, some of the important things that you really need to consider when you go through and you have any type of goal is to actually have some type of formulated plan for moving forward. Now, I know that there's a lot of things in the world that are particularly disturbing. Here moving into 2020, there's so much that's going on, around us. Again, we see that we're having, disparities in terms of racial inequalities. We see gender inequalities. We're having issues with the forest fires and the brush burning out in Australia. We're right now going through the impeachment hearings, and we have people all over the place in terms of how they feel. We're in an economic crisis in terms of the national deficit, and we continue spending more money than we're bringing in. And there are so many different issues that are going on, and it's very easy when you watch the news or read the news and you talk about the things that are going on in our everyday lives to be really pessimistic and look down and see all the bad. And ultimately, you can get to a point where you do feel hopeless, as though there's nothing that you can do to be able to change the world. Okay, I can certainly understand that type of logic, because you think to yourself, okay, here I am, I'm just sitting on my couch watching Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt, and he's encouraging me to, move forward with positive social change, but what am I going to do? I'm just a regular, worker here. I'm not a government official. I'm not a famous person. I'm not somebody who has power, tons of money. So what can I really do? I don't feel as though my voice can be heard. So really, beyond going and making my vote at the polls every single year for local officials, or going every 4 years for the national elections and so on, there's really not much I could do. However, the reality of the situation is that there is still very much that can be done. And that's some of the problem with what we have, is that oftentimes people come up with these absolutely fantastic and wonderful ideas that can truly be world-changing for people, but we don't put them into action. This brings me to that entire thought of, does a tree that fall in the forest make a sound? Well, okay, you might not be able to hear that sound from far away, maybe there are no people there. However, it does ultimately make a sound, and hopefully the critters and other little animals that are in the area can hear it, although we don't hear it at large. But with that type of mentality here that, well, if I try to come up with some idea that it's not going to go anywhere, well, if you just say it and you don't share it with anybody, how is it going to go anywhere? And that's one of the things I always find myself teaching my students and teaching my clients, especially when I have somebody who's highly intellectual. I can have a brilliant mind come into the office with so many different great ideas. However, there's no follow through. And I say to this person, I do think that you're a genius, and I think that this is a wonderful idea. You're putting down all these other people around you for not being as smart as you are, and saying that you have all the ideas to make the world a better place. However, what is the worth of your idea if it's not shared with anybody? It's gonna fall on deaf ears like the tree that falls in the forest and makes the unheard sound. And that's literally what happens. So what we're here to talk about today is what we can do to make things better. So when it comes to advocacy, there's a lot of different things that you can do. First and foremost, it's important that we educate the population in terms of what it is that is a problem. So for instance, let's take Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt. How am I advocating here? Well, I'm advocating for mental health, mental wellness, and so on. And in doing that, by educating everybody on some of the different facets of mental health and things that you can do to be able to improve your life. Now, if there's no awareness of a particular issue, there's nothing that we can do about it. We need to know that it's there. And that's one of the amazing things here with today's technology. Things that happen on one side of the world can be reported to the other in an instant. Within 1 minute, we can find out what's going on in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and they're finding out what's happening with us. So the messages are traveling quite quickly. So that's a huge advantage that we have here. The information is abundant and it is rapid. So if you have something to share, there are many different mediums that you can use, and you don't need to be a news anchor. You don't need to be a millionaire to broadcast it on TV, but it could be something that starts as simple as a social media post or doing a little recording and putting it up on YouTube, getting some other people involved. So that educational component is going to be ever so important. Other things that you could do are actually going through and training other people. Let's suppose a particular group of individuals requires a certain set of skills to be able to advocate or help you advocate. That can be part of the effort that we do. Take a look at the American Red Cross. The American Red Cross is always accepting new volunteers to be able to be a part of their program. And part of the enlistment is going in there, being able to be trained on the different things that they're doing, figuring out what your specialties are, and so on and so forth. So that could be another piece of it. Fundraising is a huge piece of advocacy. Being able to work together to be able to raise the funds to be able to help. And again, there are so many different ways that we could do this. Reaching out to people you know is a great start. Again, you don't have to spend all this money out of your own pocket, but reach out to people you know. Perhaps you can try to solicit some grant funding. Maybe you can reach out to your neighbors, other people in the community. Again, social media does a really great job of this. GoFundMe is a great one, Kickstarter and so on are really great ways to be able to raise some money. And there's plenty of different ideas for what you can do there. Again, depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve will depend on the plan that you set forth. So now that we've defined what advocacy is, what are we going to do to actually try to move forward? So I'm going to try to give an example here in terms of mental health, because that's my field of experience. And for those of you sitting at home, if you have some type of idea that you would like to work on, I would like for you to frame what I discuss here in terms of what you're familiar with and what you would like to work on. First and foremost, we need to define an issue. So one of the things that's going on in the state of Illinois as a whole, and not necessarily specific to Bolingbrook or Chicago, although there are certainly things we could be doing better in these different areas as well, but the state of Illinois as a whole, there's a major disparity in terms of who has access to mental health resources. If you're an individual who has a really great PPO insurance plan with a low deductible, low out-of-pocket, and so on, the world is your oyster. There are so many different providers, so many different hospitals, clinics, organizations that you're going to be able to go to. It's going to be quite easy to set an appointment. You wake up one morning, you're feeling depressed, make a phone call. I can almost guarantee you that with that plan, by the end of the day, you're going to be able to see somebody and get your therapy started. Now, it's a little bit of a different story for individuals who don't have that fancy PPO plan. HMOs can be a little bit more challenging, although even with those, you can still have access to a wide variety of providers. Now, let's take a look at some of the public aid plans, such as Medicaid and so on. One of the greatest challenges that I have when I'm working with clients at our practice is being able to find psychiatric services or addictions clinics that are going to be able to work with people who have Medicaid plans. Now, if I sit here and type in City of Chicago, PPO plan, find a psychiatrist, within a 15-mile radius, I could probably find you several hundred providers in a split second. However, if I take a look at some of the different Medicaid plans, I'll be stretched to find one or two in a 30-mile radius. And again, this creates a lot of problems. So when I'm taking a look at this, one of the things that I see is that we need to do something to have better equal access to mental health services for everybody. And especially what the sad part of it is that the individuals who are struggling, to have the more affordable plans and are utilizing public aid and so on, are the people oftentimes who need the help the most, and they're the ones who are really struggling to get it. And unfortunately, as we've talked about before, when it comes to addictions and stuff, we have the double stigma. Mental health is stigmatized, addictions are stigmatized, looking at it as a moral deficit. So again, a lot of people go without the type of treatment they need. So taking a look at this would be the identified problem. Now, in order for me to move forward with actually trying to have some type of action plan to do something about it, I'm going to need to do a little bit of hustle. So the next step is going to be reaching out and doing a needs assessment to figure out the people who are actually struggling in the population, who don't have access to mental health resources, find out exactly what have they done to try to get access and have been denied. What types of problems are they facing right now in terms of the mental health problems they're having? Maybe they're having issues with transportation. Maybe they don't have the technology to utilize virtual sessions. Maybe the mental health disorder is such that they're too anxious to be able to go out the door to even find a provider and so on. So what are some of those issues that we're seeing here? And we have to be able to talk about them. Now, like I said at the beginning of this episode and other episodes prior, if we have 3 or more goals, that's going to be too many. So we're going to want to focus on something very specific. So in this case, rather than focus on everything, if we go through and do the needs assessment, I can find what the #1 problem is. In this case, the #1 problem may actually be finding providers who accept these plans and do so in a timely fashion. Okay. So now we have our problem. We want to be able to figure out ways that individuals are going to have better access to better care and can do so relatively quickly. Because as we know, if you're feeling depressed, you feel like harming yourself, experiencing suicidal ideation, if you have to wait 1, 2, 3 months for an appointment, that could be a matter of life or death. So now that that's established, the second thing that we're going to do is reach out to the relevant stakeholders. Who would be the relevant stakeholders in a situation like this? Well, first and foremost, it's clearly going to be the individuals who are unable to access appropriate mental health care. Those will be the people who are going to primarily help, set the platform for what it is we're trying to do. Second, what we would want to do is we would want to communicate with the providers themselves. So one of the things I would ask is reach out to the individuals, to the 1 or 2 people, who are actually accepting these plans in the area and ask them, why do you accept this plan? Why are you one of 2 providers in the area who are actually doing this? What sets you apart from the others? What are some of the problems that you're seeing? Are you having any issues trying to see all these different clients? Are your wait lists full? Are you having issues acquiring money and so on? That would be an important conversation to have. It would also be important to have the conversation with the managed care plans themselves. So reaching out to all the different public aid companies and asking them, for instance, why are there so many limited resources? What are you doing on your end to try to improve the situation? Are you being fair in terms of the repayment that you're giving the providers? Are you being quick and timely in the repayment? Are you making it so that the paperwork is so thick that it disincentivizes the providers from even wanting to take on these cases to begin with? All these different types of questions are important. I'd want to reach out to the government officials and see what they're doing to be a part of this. What are you noticing? Is there a change in policy we can do? Perhaps we can allocate tax funds differently. So as we go through and we speak to all these individuals, figure out what the problem is, what's being done, what's not being done, we can then move on to the next part. So the next part here would be allocation of appropriate resources. So who are the people who are vested enough in this, who see it to be big enough of a problem, who are willing to do the legwork to get the job done? So what you would want to do is meet with these individuals to discuss the problem and brainstorm exactly what we could do, how we could do it, and who we should have involved to be able to move forward. So it would definitely be great to be able to have some people from each of those different populations we talked about, the individuals who are struggling, the providers, the managed care companies, some government officials, and some people in the population to be able to come in. And what we could do is we can pool the resources. So one of the things when we talk about resources that we can really consider is that, have you ever heard of that whole thing that we're 7 steps away from knowing anybody in the world? Like, it's quite amazing. So if you reach out to somebody you know and then figure the people they know, the people they know, the people they know, and so on, within those 7 steps, theoretically, we should be able to meet anybody in the world. Now, might be a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of a challenge. However, if you really think about the people who you know and the people who they know, and even take it out a third level, there are a lot of people who can be very resourceful to help you. Now, these individuals, maybe they have the financial means that you don't have to be able to put forth into this. Maybe these individuals are either experts themselves or they know other experts who would be able to come in and be able to help out. Maybe some of these individuals are webmasters and really great at technology. They can help you put together your website, put together a flyer. They can help you put together a social media campaign, whether on your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. These can be the individuals who help you put together an informative video that you could do. You know, it doesn't need to be a 30-minute TV show like what I'm doing here or on the news. You know, actually, most people watch videos that are 60 to 90 seconds long. Those have a very significant impact. You know, so being able to gather the resources to do that. You know, even being able to find people who have access to transportation to be able to help people ride around. You know, being really creative in the thinking of what you've got here. So now as we reach out and we figure those individuals who have the different resources, it's time to come up with a plan to put those resources to play to be able to make a difference. So in this case, one of the things I would want to do is first and foremost, you know, inform the population about the issue that we have, is that there are many people who are going without mental health resources that they really need. And not only do they really need them, they need them urgently, and something needs to be done. So we can have that message that's relayed out there using our social media, you know, telling other people. We can go to town hall meetings. We can go, you know, go to Capitol Hill and speak to Congress and so on, and be able to deliver that message out there and be able to disseminate it to many people. Now, as we move forward and we do this, one of the things that we have to consider is with this effort, as well as we're going out and doing it, is it going to be something that's a one-time thing, or is it going to be something that is going to be ongoing? So a one-time effort would be something that's probably a major catastrophic event, something that's never happened before, something that we don't necessarily anticipate happening again. However, with something like disparity in mental health resource access, I would think that that's an ongoing issue. And the other thing as well, as I'm sitting here and talking about the state of Illinois, however, I know many people across all the other states in the United States and even worldwide would probably agree with this. So the effort that we do want to put forth and the message that we deliver, though we want it to be specific to our locale because that's who we're trying to serve right now, we also want to consider the implications for other people to be able to replicate the program and what we're doing and be able to spread the message. And this is really where the power of the masses takes over, and we have many people delivering that message. And as we know, the more people who get involved and the more pressure there is on the people who have the authority to be able to make the change, the more likely the change is to happen. Now, with that being said here, as well as we're going through this and we have our resources, we must also consider the specifics of what we want. You know, it wouldn't be enough to just say here, well, you know, in the Chicagoland area, I see that there's 2 providers who are accepting this Medicaid plan for psychiatric services. You know, there needs to be more. Okay, you can say that, make a blanketed statement, but what does more mean? I mean, more can literally be defined as anything. More providers, we can add 1 more and say, okay, you have 3 instead of 2, that's more. Or we could double the number and have 4. So you want to be very specific with that. We want to say, okay, you know, there should be at least 100 providers who are accepting this, at least 200 providers who are accepting this. We're also going to want to be very specific in terms of what areas that's happening. Now, if there's 200 providers accepting it in a very concentrated area, well, what about the rest of the state of Illinois? You know, we're going to continue to have these issues because although now there's more providers, you know, people may have transportation considerations, as I mentioned before, and being able to get to this. So even though there's more providers, we might continue to still have the problem. So we need to be very thoughtful in what it is that we're doing with that, very strategic. And one of the final things that we have to consider here as well as we go through any advocacy effort is making sure that after everything is said and done, that we go through and we do some type of thoughtful evaluation of what we did. So we want to figure out from the very beginning, okay, what was the problem that we had? Did we address the problem appropriately? Were the stakeholders that we had involved, were they appropriate to be a part of this? Were the resources that we utilized appropriate? Did we actually achieve what it was that we wanted to achieve? What could have been done better? What worked particularly well? If we were to replicate this, what would we do insofar as trying to move forward with it? And so on and so forth. And being able to do that evaluation, there's a bunch of different ways that you can move forward with doing something like that. First and foremost, you can come up with some type of standardized type of questionnaire. You can have a survey. So perhaps the following year, after the new providers are added into the network and we see that people have better access to mental health care, we can send a survey out to all the people who had that particular plan. Asking questions such as, okay, do you feel like you have better access to health care now than you did before? Do you feel as though your provider is somebody who's of high quality? Do you feel as though the provider who you were in contact with, were you able to get access relatively quickly, or did you continue to have to wait? Do you feel like all the effort that we put into this was something that was worthwhile? Do you feel like there are any changes that we need to make? We could do that with a simple survey. Hand it to people. You can mail it out. If you don't want to mail it, you can utilize something like SurveyMonkey. You can send emails and so on. And that's going to be one of the most important things you could do. We don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time as we're going along with this because, like I said, many of the problems that we're facing here in Bolingbrook, Illinois may be, similar, and of course, compare and contrast type things are going to be different. But we may see some of the same issues that are going on in Romeoville, Lamont, Downers Grove, Naperville. Take a look at the major city of Chicago, maybe having similar problems to what we're seeing here in the suburbs, or some of the other major cities such as New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, Miami, and so on. And so as we do these efforts and we record it and we have something strategic, we can share it with others and they can continue to build and continue to make things better. And the more that we push forward with this, this is how we move forward with making the world a better place. And also taking the scaffolding of what you did put together for your advocacy effort, we can go all the way back to the beginning and we could start to address some of the other issues. So in this particular example that I gave about access to mental health care, taking a look at having some more providers, so having the plans, more providers, give more incentives and so on and so forth. Well, maybe the next part of it is going to be transportation. So going all the way through again from step one, what can we do to have better means of transportation for individuals who need it? Taking a look at the rural communities, for instance, we have people who don't have resources right out there. They have to drive 30, 40 miles to be able to find a provider. We have individuals with varied disabilities who may not be able to drive a vehicle or don't have a bus that's right down the street. And then those individuals as well, maybe simply state to them, oh, well, you can do online therapy, that works, but maybe they don't have access to the computer, maybe they don't have access to the internet or can't afford that. So what do we do for them? How can we make that better as well? We just continue going down, fixing things one at a time, being strategic with it, and that is how we plant the seeds for change. So while it is a really great thought to say that, wish for world peace, would love to see that happen. It's not something that's likely going to happen with the wave of a hand, snap of a finger, using your magic wand or anything like that. But really where it begins is a strategic, step-by-step implementation of a plan that helps get things done. It's by people like you, people like myself, people the everyday person who starts off being upset with something and makes an action plan to be able to make the change. And I always find it really ironic here is that we talk about, like hate and fear and all these negative types of emotions and how damaging they can be, to society. What do we see comes out of hate and fear? People disliking one another. People are terrorizing one another. We're seeing synagogues, churches, bombs set on fire and so on. People are being robbed. We have school shootings and all these different types of things. Elections are being rigged, all coming out of hate and fear. However, it's one good thing that I've noticed that does come out of anger is change. It's the impetus for change. You're upset about something, you're angry about something, It's great that you have that emotion. And one of the things I would challenge you from watching this show is that you take that anger that you have and do something productive out of it. Anger is one of the human emotions because it is something that is a protective factor, just like anything else we experience. Anxiety is an indication that something is wrong. You might want to make a change to be able to get to a better place. Anger is the same type of thing. Anger is an indication to you that something is wrong, something's unjust, something isn't right, and something needs to be done. But rather than just sit there and get angry and implode and start drinking and damaging things and withdraw from the world, really what you need to do is embrace that feeling that you have, write down the thoughts that you have, communicate with the people around you, start with a friend, start with a colleague, speak with your boss, talk with a mentor, do a little bit of research online, and continue to build from there, step by step as we discussed here. Well, I wish I can give you all the tips, strategies, and techniques to be able to make it happen. We're unfortunately limited on time. I hope that this does encourage you to be able to move forward with your advocacy effort, and also those New Year's resolutions as well. I haven't forgotten about those. As always, thank you for watching, and if you would, please feel free to visit our Facebook page, Mental Health Matters with Dr. Matt Gloviak. And if you have any questions, comments, or you'd like to share our post, please feel free to do so. If you'd like to be a guest on the show as well, please feel free to send me an email to dr.mgloviak@gmail.com. Thank you so much.